They thought I was clueless. My wife and her boss had a plan, smooth, calculated, airtight. What they didn't know was that I had a plan too, one that would leave them stunned and broke. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 34, a financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago. It's not flashy work, but numbers have always made more sense to me than people. That's probably why I thought I had it all figured out when it came to my marriage. Melissa and I had been together for almost 8 years, married for 5. She was smart, beautiful, and ambitious, working as a marketing director for a rising tech startup. I used to brag about her to my friends, saying she was the kind of woman who pushed me to be better. We had a nice condo in the West Loop, quiet date nights, shared Spotify playlists, weekend trips, all the little things that make a life feel full. I really believed we were solid. Looking back now, I think I ignored the signs because I didn't want to see them. Melissa started staying late at work more often. She brushed off my questions with quick, tired smiles and just another project answers. I didn't push, I respected her hustle. That's what love is, right? Trusting someone even when you don't understand everything. We used to talk about everything. But slowly, those conversations became surface level. How was your day? What should we eat? What's the plan for the weekend? The kind of routine chatter that fills the silence but doesn't say much at all. Still, I told myself it was normal. Every couple hits a rhythm. Maybe we were just in a quiet phase. I held on to the memories of late-night talks in bed, spontaneous road trips, the way she used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. I thought if I just stayed patient, things would bounce back. I had no idea that while I was holding on, she was already letting go. At the time, I didn't feel anything breaking, just a faint shift like walking into a room and sensing that something's out of place, but not knowing what it is. I convinced myself it was stress. Maybe we both needed a vacation. Maybe I needed to be more attentive. I didn't realize the storm had already started. But I would soon enough. It started with little things, the kind you almost laugh off at first. Melissa's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter or face up on the nightstand, now stayed glued to her. Locked, screen always dimmed. She started turning off notifications altogether, saying they were distracting. I told myself it was just work stress, maybe something confidential. After all, her boss, Andrew Collins, was known for pushing his team hard. She talked about him often, how demanding he was, how he expected late hours and fast turnarounds. But then her tone changed. At first, she sounded annoyed when she mentioned him. Andrew wants the campaign redone by Monday, she'd sigh. He's such a perfectionist. I'd sympathize, remind her to take breaks, to not let him push her too far. But slowly, frustration turned into admiration. She started talking about how visionary he was, how sharp his instincts were. She even started dressing differently for work, heels, tighter skirts, more makeup. She said it was about presentation and how the startup world expected a certain image. I wanted to believe her. But one night while folding laundry in our bedroom, I found a receipt in her jacket pocket. Dinner for 2, expensive wine, a reservation at a trendy spot downtown, a place we'd only gone to once on our anniversary. The date? A Tuesday, one of the many late nights she'd claimed to be working. My chest tightened, but I didn't say anything, not yet. I put the receipt back and sat with the silence. I couldn't prove anything. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But the seed had been planted, and once it's there, it starts growing in everything. The way she avoided eye contact when she came home late. How she smiled at texts she never showed me. How her hugs started feeling more like polite gestures than affection. One night, I tried to kiss her when she walked through the door. She leaned away, said she was tired, and disappeared into the bathroom. I stood there, lips still slightly parted, feeling stupid and alone in my own home. I didn't sleep much that night. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just imagining things. Something was changing, and whatever it was pulling her away from me further with each passing day. It happened on a Friday. Melissa had told me she'd be home late again. Andrew wants to prep for the investor presentation, she said, already slipping on her coat, not quite meeting my eyes. I nodded, swallowing my frustration. I'd stopped arguing by then. What was the point? I spent the evening pacing, trying to focus on a movie, scrolling endlessly through my phone, but my mind kept circling back to her, to Andrew. To that damn receipt. I wasn't the paranoid type, but doubt is like rust. Once it starts, it spreads. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard her keys in the door. I stood up, ready to pretend to be asleep, but something made me pause, her voice. She was talking softly, and she wasn't alone. I crept halfway down the hall and stopped. The front door hadn't fully closed, just enough for me to hear. "I told you he wouldn't suspect anything," Melissa whispered, laughing lightly. "Dan is so wrapped up in spreadsheets and finance blogs, he wouldn't see a neon sign if it hit him." My stomach dropped. Andrew's voice came next, low and confident. "We'll give it another few weeks. Then we move forward, you'll get the house. I'll handle the lawyers, he won't even see it coming." I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning something. Plotting against me, against everything we'd built, my wife, my home, my life. I backed away like I'd touched fire, retreating into the bedroom and closing the door without a sound. I stood there in the dark, fists clenched, trying not to scream. I wanted to confront her right then, yell, demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, maybe it was pride, maybe it was something deeper, a flicker of strategy sparking beneath the heartbreak. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her move through the apartment like nothing had happened. I heard her laugh again from the other room. It sounded different now, cold, rehearsed. That night changed everything. It was no longer about saving the marriage. It was about saving myself. And maybe, just maybe, turning the tables. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my teeth like everything was normal. Melissa came up behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and kissed my shoulder like she always did. I didn't flinch. I just looked at myself, and I didn't recognize the man staring back. I had to become someone else now, someone colder, smarter. I couldn't let her see what I knew. If I exploded too early, it'd give her a chance to regroup, to spin the story, to twist things back on me. That wasn't going to happen. So I put on the mask. At breakfast, I asked how her presentation had gone. She smiled, sipped her coffee, and said Andrew was thrilled with the pitch deck. I smiled back, told her I was proud. I even offered to pick up takeout that night, her favorite sushi place. She seemed surprised, then nodded. "That'd be nice," she said, almost cautiously. Inside, I was burning. Every second of every conversation felt like a test. I watched the way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her expression shifted subtly when a message came in, like her whole world was playing out in a universe I wasn't invited to anymore. But I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I listened, watched, memorized. I dug through old credit card statements, looked at her email backups. I created a folder hidden deep in an encrypted drive on my laptop where I started saving everything. Messages, photos of receipts, screenshots of strange transactions. It was painful work, but I wasn't just gathering evidence for revenge. I was reclaiming my power. And as I moved through our shared life, dinners, TV shows, grocery runs, I started noticing how much of myself I had erased over the years to keep the peace. How often I let her steer, ignored her sharper tones, brushed off moments that now seemed loud and obvious in hindsight. I wasn't just losing a wife. I was waking up to who I had become. And I didn't like what I saw, not because I was weak, but because I had forgotten how strong I used to be. That's when I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't just survive this. I'd turn it into something they never saw coming. I stopped asking why and started asking how. How could Melissa and Andrew be so confident? How were they planning to blindside me, legally, financially? I knew the answer deep down because I'd been passive. I'd trusted too much and for too long. That wasn't a weakness in itself, but it became one when you put it in the hands of people who saw trust as something to exploit. So I made a plan. It started small. I reviewed our joint accounts, cross-referenced what we owned, and began separating my personal finances. Quietly. No sudden moves. I already had a private brokerage account I hadn't touched in years. I began shifting funds into it bit by bit, using obscure ETFs and blockchain investments that wouldn't raise red flags. I labeled the transfers with boring names: student loan buffer, emergency savings, tax prep. Melissa never noticed. At work, I requested to work remotely a few days a week, citing burnout. I needed time to think, to dig deeper. It worked. Being at home alone gave me hours to analyze and plan. I learned everything I could about marital asset division, hidden income protections, and even prenuptial loopholes. We didn't have a prenup, but I started reading like we did. I kept thinking about Andrew, the way his voice sounded that night at the door, smooth, arrogant. I pictured the two of them sitting at a table, drawing up their little blueprint for my downfall. They thought I was just some boring finance guy. They had no idea what kind of power that really gave me. I spoke to a lawyer, not a flashy divorce attorney, but a strategic estate planner who understood how to build legal walls around wealth. We spoke in code. I said I was preparing for long-term risk management. He got the message. Day by day, I felt the old version of me fade, the passive husband, the quiet supporter. In his place, something stronger began to take form. Sharper, focused. I wasn't ready to strike, not yet, but the groundwork was being laid. And the more I uncovered, the lies, the bank statements, the patterns, the more one truth kept echoing in my head. They thought they were writing the final chapter, but I was already drafting a new ending. I didn't recognize the man in the mirror anymore, and for once, that felt like a good thing. The old me would have begged her to stay. The old me would have cried, shouted, asked what I did wrong. But that man had quietly packed his bags and made room for someone else, someone colder, wiser, and infinitely more patient. And I wasn't acting anymore. I woke up early, started running again. I cut sugar, caffeine, and distractions. My head felt clearer with every mile I logged, every page I read. I revisited books I hadn't touched since college, books on negotiation, on power, on psychology. I wasn't just healing, I was sharpening. Melissa didn't notice the shift, not at first. If anything, she seemed pleased. Maybe she thought I'd finally settled into the role she wanted. The obedient, detached husband too distracted with work and hobbies to notice her double life. But she didn't know that every smile I gave her now was rehearsed. Every "how was your day?" was bait. And every moment of silence between us was an opportunity I used to learn more about her, about Andrew, and about what they were planning next. At work, I volunteered for a project involving crypto investments, not because I needed the assignment, but because it gave me access to newer, faster tools. I moved some of my quietly gathered funds into private, decentralized wallets. Harder to trace, easier to move. I diversified stocks, tokens, even hard assets. Precious metals stored in private vaults, registered under a new LLC I'd formed quietly with my lawyer's help. This wasn't about hiding money. This was about building a fortress around myself before the storm hit. One night, Melissa was sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. Her smile was softer than usual. She looked at me and said, "You've been different lately, in a good way." I nodded. "I feel like I've woken up." She smiled, nodded back, and returned to her screen, probably messaging Andrew. I turned away and sipped my tea, heart steady, gaze focused. She thought she still had the upper hand. She thought I was still playing the same game. But I wasn't just learning the rules anymore. I was rewriting them. It happened on a Thursday. Melissa came home early, which was unusual. She had this strange calm about her, the kind of stillness that made my skin crawl. She didn't say much during dinner, just smiled politely and nodded like a hostess entertaining a guest. I played my part. I asked about her day. She asked about mine. We danced around the truth like two strangers wearing wedding rings. Then she said it. "I think we should talk." I leaned back slowly, fork paused halfway to my mouth. "Sure," I said, setting it down. "Go ahead." She looked almost rehearsed. Her words were smooth, carefully measured, like she'd practiced them in the mirror a dozen times. "I think we've grown apart. You've been so distant lately, and I've been feeling lost." I stayed quiet. She glanced down as if struggling with herself, then added, "I think it might be time for us to take some space. Maybe talk to someone, maybe even separate for a while." There it was, the trigger. Not a divorce, not yet, just enough space for her to begin the legal unraveling without alerting me too much. I knew how this game worked. I'd read the script she was following. She was coached, probably by Andrew or some lawyer in his pocket. I took a deep breath. My heart was racing, but I didn't show it. "Okay," I said calmly. She blinked. "Okay. You're right, I've been feeling it too. Maybe some space is good." She didn't expect me to agree so quickly. Her face gave it away, that flicker of confusion. I imagined she thought I'd resist, get emotional, fight for us. She needed me to be reactive, to give her the upper hand, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I stood up, cleared my plate, and rinsed it like we were just having a normal evening. Behind me, she stayed quiet. Later that night, I heard her on the phone in the other room, whispering, pacing. I caught fragments. He agreed too easily. No, he didn't ask anything. Andrew was probably on the other end. I almost laughed. They thought the plan was unfolding perfectly. What they didn't know was that every step they took was walking them straight into mine. And I was ready. I waited 3 days after Melissa dropped the separation talk before making my move. She was still living in the house, still pretending everything was calm, but she had started sleeping in the guest room, said it was just for space. I didn't argue. I even offered to help her carry her things. That threw her off again. She expected drama, emotion, tension. All she got was silence and unexpected cooperation. What she didn't realize was that I had already moved far more than she ever would. That Monday morning, I sat down at my laptop and transferred the last of my assets out of our joint investment accounts. These weren't large, flashy transfers. I had split them over several weeks, dressed them up as routine rebalancing. What remained in the shared accounts was enough to keep things looking normal for now. I called the estate lawyer and gave the green light to finalize the shell companies and trusts I'd set up. Everything was legal, quiet, airtight. The ownership of my biggest assets, the rental property, the private crypto wallets, even my consultancy stake, had all been transferred or obscured through layers she'd never be able to untangle without a forensic team. All while leaving our legally shared assets untouched, just enough to make it look like I hadn't done a thing. That afternoon, Melissa asked if I wanted to talk to a mediator. She said it sweetly, like we were just being mature adults. I smiled and nodded. Let's do it. Inside, I was calm because by now I had already seen the draft email she and Andrew had prepared. They hadn't been careful. She left her iPad unlocked on the coffee table one morning while she showered. A thread was open, him, and an attorney copied on CC. They spoke of clean division, how she'd secure the home, and how I wouldn't resist if he stayed passive. Passive? I nearly laughed. By the end of that week, I'd restructured everything. I even withdrew a portion of my personal capital gains and quietly prepaid legal fees to a top-tier firm downtown. Not the kind that advertised on billboards, the kind who only took clients by referral. That night, I looked at Melissa as she sat scrolling beside me on the couch. They had all the pieces set on the board. But I had already flipped it. The mediator's office was quiet, too quiet. Neutral walls, soft chairs, polite smiles. It was the kind of place designed to make you feel like everything could be resolved with a handshake. But I knew better. Melissa sat across from me in a beige blazer I'd never seen before. Her hair was neat, makeup light, expression calm, too calm. Beside her sat her lawyer, a sleek woman with a permanent smirk. I didn't recognize her, but I already knew the type. They thought they were walking into a simple negotiation. I didn't bring anyone with me, not yet. I wanted the silence to speak for itself. The mediator welcomed us and started with the usual formalities. Then Melissa's lawyer slid a thick envelope across the table. "This is our proposed division of assets," she said. "We believe this reflects fairness and clarity. Melissa is willing to waive spousal support in exchange for the house, the vehicle, and the joint accounts." I didn't even open it. I just looked at Melissa. She couldn't hold eye contact for long. I nodded slowly, then reached into my own folder and placed a single document on the table. 1 page, clean, precise. "I'm willing to agree to a fair split," I said. "But before we proceed, there are a few corrections we should make." The mediator took the paper. Her eyes scanned the lines, then they widened just slightly. Melissa's lawyer leaned forward, reading over her shoulder. That's when the silence cracked. "What is this?" the lawyer asked. "A revised list of individual holdings," I said. "All legally separate, verified by an independent forensic accountant. None of these assets are subject to division under community property law. The financials you're referring to are out of date." Melissa looked confused. "What are you talking about? Those are joint." "No," I interrupted gently. "They were not anymore." The room went quiet. I watched realization settle across her face. The timeline, the strategy, the cold, quiet moves I'd made right under her nose. Her lawyer sat back, suddenly a lot less smug. The mediator cleared her throat. "Well, this does change things." Melissa didn't say anything, just stared at me like she didn't recognize the man across from her. I didn't gloat, I didn't smirk. I just gave her the same calm smile she had given me the night she asked for space. Checkmate. The divorce finalized quietly. No courtroom drama, no screaming matches. Just paperwork, signatures, and one last hollow conversation where Melissa told me she hoped we could still be friends. I nodded. Take care of yourself, I said. She blinked like she wanted more, maybe an apology, maybe closure. But I had nothing left to give her, not out of anger, but peace. I had made it through the fire. There was no need to throw ashes back in her face. She moved out 2 weeks later. I walked through the empty house afterward, the living room, the bedroom, the spaces that once held laughter and quiet dinners and long Sunday mornings. They felt hollow now, but not in a painful way. More like a reset. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee and finally let myself feel it all. The betrayal, the pain, the fear, and then the freedom. Because in the end, Melissa and Andrew hadn't just lost. They de-taught me something. They thought love was leverage. They thought trust was weakness. They thought silence meant surrender. But I turned silence into strategy, and trust, I finally learned to give that to myself. I didn't just protect my money. I protected the man I used to be and let him grow into someone stronger. Someone who didn't need anyone's permission to stand tall. Someone who could walk away from the people who tried to break him and not just survive, but rebuild. With the financial moves I'd made, I bought a small condo overlooking the lake. Nothing flashy, just mine, quiet, peaceful. I got a dog, his name's Max. Loyal, funny, always happy to see me. Real loyalty, the kind you don't have to second guess. I even started mentoring younger guys at work, helping them not just with money, but with mindset. I could see the same passivity in their eyes that I once carried, and I told them what no one told me. Don't confuse being calm with being blind. Don't confuse being good with being weak. One night, months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Andrew had been transferred to a different office. Something about HR complaints and a conflict of interest. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care anymore. Because I had already won, not just the game they played, but the one they never saw coming. The one where I walked away with everything they couldn't steal. Myself,